Hi, everybody, and welcome to the ADHD Eavesdrop, where you can be a butterfly on the wall and listen in on my conversations. Today, we're talking with Jen Kreiner, a colleague, friend, ADHD coach. We've seen her before. We're welcoming her back. I love having her on all the time. And she's going to discuss her new understanding of the mind-body connection known as somatics. She is currently being certified as a trauma-informed psychosomatic practitioner so that she can support all clients regardless of neurotype or experiences. Welcome back, Jen. So happy to have you.
Thank you, Janine. Yes, I'm so happy to be here. I feel like as I accumulate more appearances, I need something like an SNL host or something like the special jacket for being here a lot.
Yeah, we need to find out if you've been on. Have you been on 5 times? I think you have.
I don't know. I don't know.
Isn't it a
We'll
5-time
have to,
jacket?
yeah, we'll have to go back and count.
Yes.
Yes.
So somatics, I'm so excited to talk about this because I can't tell you how many times I've heard people say, and I've said myself, "Oh, I carry my stress here. I can tell I'm stressed out because of this." And it goes so much deeper than that. And I'm excited to hear what you've been learning.
Yes, and that is such a beautiful awareness to understand that we all have very unique holding patterns of our experiences. And ultimately, somatics is working with the dynamics of the body and unexpressed emotions.
Tell me what's so great about learning about somatics?
Yeah, yeah. So as an ADHD coach, the more that I learn about other individuals and my own personal journey, there just appears to be this kind of Venn diagram of, certain kind of neurodivergence and trauma. And where that intersection is a space that I wasn't really familiar with, and I didn't feel comfortable in terms of being responsible with my education and training in order to support individuals because we are very clear about our ethical guidelines as coaches and where we end and maybe support through therapy begins. And so in seeing so much around these patterns, these internal narratives, resistance to allowing yourself to go to a place that when we meet something with resistance, it will persist. And so in order to move forward, which is as coaches, that's what we're doing, is kind of paving that road to your future self. And in that real stickiness, that friction, there was just something there that I wanted to understand a little bit more about. And so I did an exchange with coaching services with another coach who was a somatic coach. And it was pretty powerful. You don't have to name it. You don't have to put words or connect an experience to why something comes up for you in present day based on a past experience. And there is a way to safely and gently process an unexpressed emotion. So basically going through that cycle of activation to a response that would be like a healthy one to move that through your system so that it's not ultimately holding your nervous system hostage. We all have triggers and kind of auto responders, and healing through somatics is giving ourselves different coping tools so that we can move through that cycle, move through that response, and choose intention and take back control and have more agency over our nervous system. And so when I talk about the nervous system, very specifically talking about the autonomic nervous system in the parasympathetic and the sympathetic. So parasympathetic being that rest and digest. So I'm safe, I can rest, my body's going to do, all of the things it needs to do. Whereas on the other side of that activated state is that sympathetic nervous system, that fight, flight, freeze, which we all likely are pretty familiar with what we do in a stressful situation. And Also learning, how, and I work a lot with professionals who are kind of in burnout or on the edge of burnout, and understanding what burnout is just a state of freeze, a functional freeze usually. So in that, this work aims to support individuals that I'm already working with with a different modality to enable them to become more resilient. And so in resiliency, we can oscillate between those states of rest and digest and fight or flight in a healthy way. So we're always able to come back into that window of tolerance, which is like our optimal state of being, where we can connect with others, where we can connect with ourselves. And so this work has been extremely powerful. I have seen how it works for myself, and in these practices and new awarenesses, I have seen it really make an impact on increasing resiliency and helping folks to kind of reach their goals in a way that feels very sustainable.
Oh, I really am kind of glomming onto there's a lot of information, but what really struck me was that it's not about how our body responds. It is about that, like, but I when we first started talking, I'm thinking, well, when I get stressed out, I carry it here, and that it's a somatic response in my body. And as you're talking about actually using somatics as a tool to create a better life. And so I'm thinking about not so much using it as a tool, but how do you calm down some of those somatic responses? So I'm really excited about this angle of, yeah, you use it as a tool. So tell me more about that.
Yeah, and I think that you can probably identify with the idea of rumination, the thought whirlwind that we can have, and overwhelm, and we get stuck up here. And so in somatics, it's skill building to drop out of here when the intensity of the thoughts, when the intensity of an interaction causes an emotional response. We learn to drop down into our bodies and allow ourselves to go inward. And can I be with what's here right now? Where am I feeling this sensation? Is there a heat? Is there a sharpness? And so it's just starting to pay attention in a different way to yourself when you are in an external environment or something causes that internal swirl of overwhelming thoughts, and being able to drop down, because our body is the first thing to interact. Our nervous system is the first thing to interact with the world around us. And so it's starting to listen to the wisdom of our body.
And it almost sounds like we have a little bit of control with our somatic responses. When you say dropping it down, you're working on changing your somatic response to something, right?
It's more allowing yourself. So I think that an adaptive protective mechanism over the course of our lives is to disconnect from our body. It is to stay up in our head. And so this is a process of paying attention, starting to reinitiate that relationship with your body. So that word dissociation is being disconnected from your emotional experience. An emotion is a sensation in your body.
Oh, give me an example of a somatic. Give me like a real life example of somatics and how you would work with it. Say you're having a very strong somatic response to stress.
Yeah. So maybe if you could share maybe the last time that response, you were in a high stress situation. And so let's make it relatable for you.
So let's say I'm trying to think what the most stressful thing. I got invited on a cruise with my mother, which has caused me a great deal of stress planning that cruise.
Yeah. Yeah. And so as you're even, sharing that or talking about that, can you feel anywhere in
Absolutely.
your
Right in
body?
the back of my head and in my neck, right here.
Yeah. Yeah. And so it's in recognition that likely, that could be one of your holding patterns. And so our holding patterns are in the fascia, which is like the sheath that goes around our muscles, our organs. It's this protective layer, but it also is where we store trauma. And so trauma is a response where there was an activation and we could not move through the cycle to respond, to protect ourselves. And so if you're thinking of like childhood, right? Like we have to choose safety to be taken care of by our family, let's say. So we will tuck our responses in our pocket and not be able to fight for ourselves, speak out on our own behalf. And that all becomes stored over time. And so if you're feeling this, this tightness, and it's not necessarily your family of origin, it could come from any, right? Any
Really?
we all right, we all have different environments and spheres, so our communities, our church groups, our social experiences, academic, professional, family, right? So it can come from anywhere, and trauma is not necessarily just like a one-time, there's shock trauma, like the car accident, but then there's also repetitive trauma, so being in a relationship where you're unsafe, but you stay in it. So in that, you're making these plans for the cruise, or you're talking to your family about your plans, and then you're just feeling yourself get tense, or you're feeling this like whirlwind of overwhelm, almost like anticipating worst case scenario, whatever it is.
We never go there,
That's
do we?
yeah, to just pause, which I think we've talked about in other podcasts, which is the hardest thing to do, but it's in that slowing down where we give ourselves the space to bring awareness to things and heal. And so in that moment where you're feeling stressed, it's being able to just, take a breath, give yourself space, acknowledge. It's just being able to witness and sit with. Can I sit with this sensation? Can I describe what that feels like? Is it a tightness? Is it heavy? Does it feel constrictive? And so it's just being able to breathe into that sensation, not having to name it, not having to connect it to a past experience, but it's just giving that emotion an opportunity to be witnessed. I see you, I hear you, I'm with you, and taking some breaths and recognizing that our body can hold and process so much more than we think it can. And we've gone through life thinking we're supposed to always have this like linear, happy, productive, perfect human experience. And the truth is, we wouldn't know, joy without despair. We wouldn't know productivity without feeling drained. And so we need to have this, yin and yang of our experiences to know one from the other. And it's perfectly normal. But ADHDers do not like the discomfort of negative or dark emotions. And so they will avoid them. That's usually the underlying layer of procrastination or task initiation. There's usually something deeper going on that is connected to a darker emotion that is too challenging to sit with.
Would
And
you
so in
define as
somatic,
a darker emotion?
fear, anger, shame. And so while you have those being kind of like a core, there's a lot of, different feelings that you would assign where those are like the underlying emotions. And so because this is a new skill, we're learning it, we're dipping a toe into it. So if something doesn't feel like we can handle it, right? That's why we ask that question. Can I be with this emotion? And if I can be with it for 10 seconds, that's 10 seconds longer than I tried before. And so we kind of titrate, right? We just dip a toe into this idea of pendulation between discomfort and comfort. And so there's different tools within that we teach to resource. So finding a space internally within your body that feels like a safe space. So I can put my hand on my heart, perhaps could be, I know that I am safe, because whatever is triggering right now is making me feel like I need to run or hide. And so that is connected to the experience that caused it to settle in my nervous system. And so it's teaching myself, I know that my feet are on the ground, I'm connected, I'm supported, I'm safe in sitting with this really dark feeling.
And do you try to manipulate using somatics as far as like breathing or muscle relaxation techniques or anything like that? Do you do those types of things? Or is it more just about the being with it? Just curious if you try to manipulate or if you just try to accept.
How does manipulating things work for you in general?
Depending. What do you mean?
Yeah, I mean, just a funny question because manipulation in itself is to try and make something different than what it is.
And that's what I'm saying is, so when we're dealing with your training, when we talk about somatics and those responses, some people would be inclined to want to change them. Like, I'm feeling tense, I want to untense myself, and I'm going to use breathing techniques. I'm going to do these things, and I'm going to get rid of that particular somatic response to my stress. Or are we sitting in the response and recognizing it and hearing what it has to tell us and not fighting it? Or is it a combination of the two?
Yeah. So that's a great question. Sorry for the response. So, in all of the work that I have done with mindset, right? Because we kind of are trained in a mindset management kind of foundational way with the ADHD training, is that we have to accept before anything else can happen. Before we can make change, we have to accept. And that's meeting ourselves right where we are. So it's so interesting in this training because a life of exercise and activity, and you get a sore muscle, you are just like stretching, like really going for it. And like, almost like the more pain you feel in the stretch, the more you feel like you're stretching it out. The body needs to be approached with nurturing and with a gentle invitation. It needs to trust in order to let go. And so where I might feel a tightness, like you said, kind of on your neck or back, before I start stretching, I now will just bring awareness and breath to that area, 7 to 10 breaths, and we can really direct the awareness of our breath anywhere in our body. It's pretty incredible. And to just say, I see you. I'm here with you. And it is incredible what happens. It's a settling, it's a shifting. And so I I would say that it is a practice of just allowing yourself to be with where you feel the tension, where you feel the sensation.
Not every sensation is necessarily going to be a bad one.
No, a lot of people need to receive, right? Like love, like there's a practice love scooping, right? Bringing love into your heart. I am worthy. I deserve to be loved. I am lovable. And that was a really hard practice for me. So teaching yourself that you are, as a human, you are inherently worthy. And so it is opening yourself up to be able to process, right? Like taking compliments. I think this was a big topic for our class at some point. And so while I have learned in my head to take a compliment as a gift, and I can maybe override that sometimes to be able to accept a compliment, it's a way different experience to understand now that I can receive.
It's okay.
Yeah.
So,
So that's a great point.
and so when and I don't know a lot about this particular, what would you call it? It's not a strategy, it's a study, it's a science.
I would say it's a modality.
Reality. Okay, so I'm not really familiar with this, so I'm learning as we're going. Like I'm absorbing it like a little sponge here, trying to figure it out because there are a lot of little nuances. If you really want to understand it, people can say, "Well, yeah, a somatic response is how my body feels," but it goes much deeper than that. And so when we do talk about a somatic response, oh, heard of people getting ill or like literally having strong responses that they're incapacitated or nearly so or whatever. Talk to me a little bit about how that can happen.
Yeah, I mean, what comes to mind as you say that is, chronic pain, chronic illnesses, autoimmune disorders. A lot of these are kind of inexplicable, really challenged to be tested and find a source of what these are. And while there are always going to be, epigenetic factors, right? What's literally passed on to us in our DNA, trauma from prior generations, there's environmental impacts, and then there's our experiences. And when we store unexpressed emotions over a long period of time, something has to happen. They have to express in some form. And so I think that that's, what we see. And especially in women, when you have, 80% of autoimmune disorders falling on women, and we societally have to, you know, adhere to a societal expectation or norm where we are carrying now in kind of like our generation, carrying full-time work, a family, being everything to everyone, and to do it with a smile, this is what what we're seeing. And so it is my hope that, having a guarantee around that, this offering this practice to my clients so that they can give themselves daily, weekly sources of connecting to themselves, that they start to process some of those things. And we know that, like, a lot of the tools that we learned, even just like boundaries, learning to set boundaries, is that we don't have to hold it inside our needs. We can express what's important to us and what will support us. And then we learn very quickly who around us is willing to offer us what we need. And so if you go a lifetime of never setting a boundary, right, or never putting your energy into where you can control decisions, and everything is always happening to you, and you're just holding that and tucking it in your pocket. I'm fine, I'm fine, I'm fine. The t-shirt that says that is, it's just such a disservice to self to not allow yourself to feel what's hard.
Mm, yeah. Oh, that for me, a big part of how I've started to approach some of those darker emotions has been through curiosity. So this fits in with that idea because it's being curious about what's happening in my body and why it's happening, and can I be with that? Can I be okay with that? And that all kind of blends in with that philosophy of the curiosity rather than fighting it or, you know, trying to ignore it or put it ignoring it is probably the best thing, the best response I think that most people have, or the most often the response, I wouldn't say the best response, would be to just ignore those responses and not pay attention to them. And so I know that's part of my curiosity now. I need to check in with myself. I need to be curious about where I'm feeling it in my body and how it's responding. Makes
Well, and ignoring, right? In avoiding, we're taking care of ourselves, right? We're protecting ourselves from that pain. And that makes sense. And that's a learned self-soothing behavior that can translate into, I think scrolling is probably one of the biggest ones now, but smoking, drinking, gambling, addictions, that is how somebody has learned to take care of themselves. And, there is no shame in not wanting to feel pain. And so in this practice, it's understanding that there are different tools to be able to support yourself and to self-soothe. And so once you have access to those, then it can be an opportunity to move forward. But there is something about, we would rather sit in the familiar of this pain than the unfamiliarity of uncertainty with stepping into healing. And that's totally and completely understandable. Our brain will continue to serve us up the shoulds to protect ourselves.
absolutely. And so, like you said, it's a protective it's a protective mechanism for us, and all of it is ultimately to keep ourselves feeling safe and feeling like we're okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, when we start to dig into things though, and we start to check them out and get into some of those darker feelings, and we see how they're affecting us or where they're at in our bodies, that can be frightening, but it can also it turns into protecting ourselves and taking care of
Mhm.
ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And so in this work, it's recognizing in order to be gentle with yourself, to go into it, we want change to happen like that. But this is a slow, progressive experience where we are just giving ourselves permission to feel what is hard, to feel what is painful, and to understand that that is a part of the human experience, but to do it in a way that meets us where we are. Everybody is different in their willingness, in their experiences. And so it's just as a practitioner, as a coach, it's really on an individual client basis. This work is, really keyed in and tuned in to when they're sharing and an emotion word or, a posture or something is present that can be reflected back. It's an opportunity. Okay, what's going on in your body right now? Can we be with that? And it's instead of like telling the story and going through and moving, it's like, okay, whoa, I'm having a really intense reaction right here to what my husband just said, let's say. And it's recognizing, do I have any kind of body reactions? Do I clench somewhere? Is there tension? My jaw, right? Do I clench my jaw? And it's just being with yourself in that moment to give that pause so that we're just starting to, right? We're just starting to notice. We're not trying to change. We're not trying to, manipulate or do anything. We're just trying to see what our existing condition is. And can I be with that? That really hurt, whether it was meant to or not, the impact of what was said or done stung. So can I give myself a few seconds to just witness what my body's trying to tell me? And then we go into the practice of, resourcing, find my resource. I am safe right now. I can be with this. And it just slowly starts to morph how we are impacted when we can really trust ourselves to know the difference between being safe and not being safe. And again, it's because we're given different coping mechanisms in this modality.
Jen, believe it or not, are at that getting at the end of our time, but I do want to ask you one more question before we go. And is a question more for me than probably our audience, but I think our audience would appreciate the question as well. You were going to kind of put this whole idea, this whole modality into kind of a chart or something to simplify it the what is very abstract in concept, what would it kinda look like? It taking an abstract concept such as this and making it understandable for people who don't understand it at first.
Yeah, yeah. I would say it would be a stimulus of some kind, right? So external, internal thought. There's some kind of stimulus, and we're going to have this autopilot response over here. So in this middle space, we are building a bridge in a way that we learn to drop into our body, to hold space, to witness. And then that response, which at one point was kind of that default based on that trigger, is going to start to change because we have begun to process what has been held in our nervous systems. And so in that space, that bridge is connecting our mind, our body, and really growing our sense of what resiliency is.
Cool. Sounds like it's gonna be an amazing addition to your coaching skill bag, which is getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and I know you're an amazing coach. This is just gonna make you a more amazing coach. Um
Thank you.
So thanks for coming on and talking about this. I've learned so much. I've absorbed so much. And I always look forward to seeing you next time you come on.
Well, thank you for having such a wonderful platform of education and relatability and community for everyone, and specifically individuals who have ADHD.
Well, with that, we're going to say I hope our butterflies on the wall enjoyed what they heard. And if they did, we want them to subscribe and like and do all the fun stuff. And see you next time.
Thank you.